All right, so welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're going to do something a little different.
Ooh.
We're going to look at what viewers are saying about a show.
About a show. Interesting.
And the show is called Afro Samurai.
Okay.
We're not just going to be talking about the star ratings, but we're also going to be talking about the why
Yeah.
behind the ratings. So
Okay.
what made people like it, what made people not like it,
I see.
and what was captivating about this show and maybe what wasn't.
Right.
Now, I know anime may not be everybody's cup of tea,
Yeah, for sure.
but this show is really interesting because it blends samurai action with hip-hop,
Wow.
which I think is a very interesting combination, and I think that's what's made this show so fascinating to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's really unique.
So, quick recap for anyone who isn't familiar with the show. It's a 5-episode miniseries aired back in 2007.
Okay.
It's a revenge story, and it's set in a futuristic feudal Japan.
Interesting.
And Samuel L. Jackson voices the main character.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But today we're really interested in, those user reviews, those little nuggets of insight
Yeah.
into what viewers loved, what they hated,
Yeah.
and why this show sticks with people.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely sticks with you. It's that kind of visual and thematic experience that you can't really shake off easily.
Yeah.
It stays in your mind.
So one thing that jumped out to me when I was reading these reviews
Okay.
was this idea of style over substance.
Okay.
It seems like a lot of reviewers really emphasized how much the show focuses on visuals and action, maybe sometimes at the expense of a super deep plot or complex characters.
I see.
So I was curious what your take on this is.
Well, I mean, it really depends on what the creators are going for.
Yeah.
If the goal is just a purely visceral, adrenaline-fueled ride, then maybe a straightforward plot isn't such a deal breaker.
Right, so it's about managing expectations.
Yeah, definitely.
Like one reviewer, Leverton, actually praised the show's style.
Okay.
He compared it to like Blaxploitation films and Kung Fu cinema.
Oh, wow, that's a good comparison.
And he was into that. He liked those over-the-top aesthetics.
I can see that connection for sure. Think about those classic Blaxploitation films, with the gritty visuals, the stylized violence.
Yeah.
If Afro Samurai is tapping into that same visual language, it's like setting a tone right. Like, get ready for a wild ride.
And Mam's one definitely seemed to be along for that ride because they called the fight choreography jaw-dropping.
Okay.
But then you have someone like Cole's Notes who found the plot a bit predictable.
Right.
So are we sacrificing story depth for those awesome action sequences?
Well, it's a balancing act for sure. And,
Yeah.
Afro Samurai may lean more heavily on the action side of things.
Okay.
But it really depends on what you as the viewer are looking for in a show.
Now, we can't talk about Afro Samurai without mentioning, I guess, the elephant of the samurai in the room,
Right.
which is Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
He voices both Afro Samurai and Ninja Doan.
Wow.
I mean, that has to be a big draw for some people, right?
Absolutely. Having a name like Samuel L. Jackson attached to your project, I mean, it brings instant recognition. It adds a certain coolness factor. But, is it always a good thing?
Right.
Does it enhance the viewing experience for everyone, or could it be distracting for some?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because, we have Songmaster 2005 just gushing about Jackson's performance, saying it's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
But then you have Iron Monkey 92, who felt like Jackson's talent was wasted.
Oh.
Because Afro Samurai doesn't actually have that much dialogue.
Interesting.
So do you think they have a point?
Well, I mean, if you're going to cast someone as iconic as Samuel L. Jackson, you want to make sure that they have enough to do, right?
Right.
Otherwise, it does feel like a missed opportunity.
Okay, let's talk about something else that comes up a lot in these reviews.
Okay.
And that's the violence.
Right.
I mean, people are very upfront about how graphic this show is. And it seems like some people love it and some people hate it. So I don't know, is this just a matter of taste or?
Well, the use of violence in media is always a tricky thing.
Yeah.
To navigate what's considered acceptable or even enjoyable can vary so wildly depending on the cultural context, the genre expectations.
Right.
Individual preferences.
Right. So we have Mamsie One, who actually said the graphic violence was a selling point for him.
Okay.
Like he was really into the whole over-the-top gore fest.
So think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Mamsie One might be drawn to that level of violence because it pushes boundaries.
Yeah.
Maybe they see it as like a form of artistic expression,
Yeah.
a way to heighten the stakes and intensity of the story.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sam Taro went even further, and he compared Afro Samurai to classic samurai films like Ninja Scroll and Lone Wolf and Cub.
Okay.
Both of which are known for being pretty violent.
Yeah.
But then you have Iron Monkey 92, who was not having it.
Uh-oh.
He said that the violence was completely excessive and took away from the story.
Interesting.
So how do you reconcile those contrasting views?
Well, maybe it comes down to how the violence is used.
Okay.
You know, if it feels gratuitous or exploitative, it's going to turn some viewers off.
Right.
But if it serves a purpose, you know, if it's there to heighten tension or to reveal something about a character or to create a specific mood,
right,
then it might be more palatable to those viewers.
I think this ties into something that we were talking about earlier,
Okay.
which is this whole blend of cultural influences.
Right.
You've got samurai, you've got hip-hop, you've got Blaxploitation.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to process, and some reviewers loved it. Like Leverton, he actually broke down how all these different elements fed into the show's DNA.
You know, that's fascinating because they actually traced the lineage of those influences. Like, they connected the 70s funk scene to the rise of hip-hop and then to Afro Samurai. It shows a real depth of understanding.
And Quinoa 1984 compared Afro Samurai to 70s exploitation films.
Wow.
Which, if you think about it, makes sense.
Yeah.
Given those shared themes of stylized violence and gritty aesthetics.
Yeah, it's like the creators are drawing inspiration from a specific era of filmmaking known for pushing boundaries.
Right.
They're using those familiar tropes and visual cues to create something new, but also something that feels familiar at the same time.
And D. Reed saw Afro Samurai as part of a trend.
Oh, yeah.
Pointing to the Boondocks is another example of blending hip-hop and anime.
Okay.
But Risanoko had a totally different take.
Okay.
Criticizing what they saw as like a heavy-handed American influence on a Japanese setting. They felt like it was out of place.
You know, it raises an interesting question, Rita.
Huh? Yeah.
When you're dealing with cultural fusion, how do you strike that balance between paying homage and appropriating? It's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
And it's clear that Afro Samurai sparks some debate in that regard.
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you think?
Oh.
Is it even possible for a show like this to blend these seemingly disparate cultural influences without, stepping on anyone's toes?
It's a delicate dance, and I think it ultimately comes down to intentionality and respect.
Okay.
If the creators are genuinely interested in exploring those connections and celebrating those cultures, I think it can be done, but it requires a lot of thoughtfulness and sensitivity.
I think that's a great place to stop for today.
Okay.
And we'll pick this back up in part 2.
Looking forward to it.
So join us next time for part 2 of our deep dive into Afro Samurai.
All right, see you then.
All right, see ya.
So, as we dig a little deeper into these Afro Samurai reviews, it's interesting how this idea of primal instincts keep popping up.
Okay.
It seems like the show is hitting on a very base level with viewers, and it makes you wonder if that was intentional on the part of the creators.
Right. Yeah. Was this something they were trying to do, or did it just sort of happen organically?
Exactly. And like Leverton was saying, maybe Afro Samurai, it appeals more to instinct than intellect. Maybe it's not so much about dissecting the plot, but more about feeling the impact of the visuals, the music, the whole experience.
So even though the story might be relatively straightforward, the way it's presented is what's really grabbing people.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like the show is speaking a different language, one that bypasses the logical brain and goes straight for the gut.
Interesting.
And this is where those comparisons to exploitation films become even more interesting. Yeah. Remember those films were all about grabbing your attention, keeping you on the edge of your seat with pure style and intensity.
Right.
Maybe Afro Samurai is doing something similar, but with that added layer of animation.
Okay, so speaking of animation, one thing I noticed in a lot of the reviews was that people seem to have very different opinions. About the animation style itself.
Yeah, definitely. There were some people who loved it, some people who hated it.
Yeah, like Kidwa in 1984 said the animation was slick and cool.
Okay.
But then Risanoko just straight up called Afro Samurai himself hideous.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So big difference of opinion.
It is. So is it just a matter of taste, or is there something more going on here?
Well, remember how we talked about the show's exaggerated stylized violence?
Yeah.
I think that same approach applies to the animation as a whole.
Okay.
It's not aiming for realism or conventional beauty.
Oh.
It's deliberately playing with those extremes, pushing the boundaries of what animation can do.
So it's less about like pretty pictures and more about
Yeah.
creating a specific mood and atmosphere.
Precisely. And don't forget, this atmosphere is heavily influenced by all those Blaxploitation samurai elements we talked about earlier. That grittiness, the rawness of the visuals.
Yeah.
They're all part of building that world.
And it's not just the visuals though, right?
Right.
It's music too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like RZA from Wu-Tang Clan composed the score.
Oh, wow.
That's not just some random choice.
No, definitely not.
So what do you think is going on there?
Well, I mean, think about RZA's music, those gritty beats.
Yeah.
Those dark, almost cinematic soundscapes.
Uh-huh.
Now imagine that sound paired with Afro Samurai's, hyper-violent fight scenes.
Right.
It's not just background music. It's adding a whole other layer of intensity, almost amplifying the violence.
Right. So the music is almost like another character.
Exactly, yeah.
In the show.
Yeah, and don't forget, that sonic fusion, like traditional Japanese instruments blending with like modern hip-hop beats.
Yeah.
It's another way the show is bridging those seemingly disparate cultural influences.
No. There's one character I want to talk about.
Okay.
Because he seems to be pretty divisive in these reviews.
Okay.
And that's Ninja.
Oh, Ninja. Yeah.
Some people seem to love him. Some people seem to hate him.
He's a polarizing figure, that's for sure.
What's your take on him?
Well, remember Bob the Moo called him refreshing and entertaining? And then you have Iron Monkey 92 finding him annoying and unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost like he's a litmus test for the entire show.
A litmus test? What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it.
Okay.
If you're into Afro Samurai's over-the-top style, that blend of action and humor, you're probably going to enjoy Ninja's antics.
Right.
But if you're looking for a more grounded, serious experience, he's going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Okay.
He embodies that stylistic excess that either draws you in or pushes you away.
So he's not just like a badly written character.
Right.
He's like a deliberate choice.
Yeah. It's a deliberate choice
to really
test the audience.
Yeah, test the audience.
Yeah, and see, how much of that
right.
weirdness you can take.
And speaking of breaking the rules, what about the show's tone overall?
Right.
It's a revenge story, which you would think would be like dark and serious.
Right.
But then it has all these moments of slapstick humor.
Yeah.
And these bizarre characters.
It's true.
There's just this playful energy that keeps popping up.
Yeah. It's like the show is constantly playing with your expectations.
Yeah.
It's hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Is it an action series? Is it a comedy? Is it a drama?
Right.
Maybe it's all of those things at the same time.
Yeah. It's hard to categorize.
It's a hybrid.
Yeah.
It's a genre-bending experiment that keeps you guessing. And, that experimentation extends to the visual language as well.
Yeah.
We talked about the Blaxploitation, samurai influences, but there are also moments where the animation gets almost surreal.
Yeah.
Almost psychedelic.
Yeah. There are some scenes where like the style just completely shifts.
Yeah.
And it's like you're watching a different show.
It's true. Yeah.
What do you think the creators were going for there?
Well, maybe they're using the visuals to kind of reflect the characters' internal states.
Oh, okay.
Or to heighten the emotional impact of certain scenes.
Right, like they're not just showing you the violence.
Right.
They're making you feel it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like a way of getting under your skin, making the whole experience more unsettling.
Right, more memorable.
Yeah, exactly.
And, isn't that what great art is supposed to do?
Yeah.
Provoke a reaction, make you think, make you feel something.
This goes back to what we were talking about before with that whole instinct versus intellect.
Right.
Like it's not trying to spoon feed you the answers
or
follow some predictable formula.
Yeah.
It's trying to create a visceral, like emotional experience that's going to stick with you.
Exactly. And that's why, even all these years later,
people are still talking about Afro Samurai. It's a show that defies easy categorization.
Right.
It challenges our assumptions about what anime can be.
So to sum up part 2 here.
Yeah.
We've uncovered, I think, some really fascinating layers to this show.
Yeah.
The deliberate use of style and violence to create that visceral impact.
Yeah.
The complex interplay between the music and the visuals.
Right.
And just the show's overall willingness to embrace the absurd.
Yeah.
And challenge the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're not done yet. There's still a lot more
Yeah.
to uncover in these reviews.
You know, it's incredible just how much there is to talk about with Afro Samurai.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, we've talked about the style, the violence, the music, the characters.
Yeah.
I feel like we could go on for hours.
It really speaks to the density of a show, you know.
Yeah.
It only had a 5-episode run.
Right.
But it just packed so much in there.
Yeah, and it seems like people really have strong feelings about it one way or the other.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like you either love it or you hate it.
Right.
There's not a lot of middle ground.
And that's interesting in and of itself, right?
Yeah, I think it says a lot
Yeah.
about the show that it's not afraid to be bold, to take risks,
Right.
you know, challenge the audience. It's not trying to please everybody.
Yeah.
Which paradoxically might be why it resonates so deeply with its target audience.
Do you think that Afro Samurai benefits from being niche?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't have to appeal to everybody. It's free to just...
Yeah, when you're not constrained by the need to be commercially viable, you can experiment more freely, you know?
Right.
You can explore themes and ideas that might be considered too edgy or too controversial for a mainstream audience.
And I think that really comes through in these reviews.
Definitely.
Like, whether people love it or hate it, they acknowledge that it's doing something different.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sense of originality there.
Yeah, like it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I think so.
You know? In this world where everything, sequels and reboots and predictable storylines, this is like...
Yeah, it stands out as a truly original creation.
Yeah, an actual artistic vision.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what would the landscape of entertainment look like if more creators were willing to...
Yeah, what if they were all willing to take these kinds of risks?
Yeah, take these risks.
Yeah, it'd be so much more diverse and so much more interesting.
And I think that's ultimately what makes this show so compelling.
Right.
Even now, so many years later, that it, you know, it sparks these conversations, it pushes boundaries.
Yeah.
It challenges our assumptions about what animation can be.
Yeah, and what storytelling in general can be.
What storytelling can be.
Yeah.
It seems like it really got under people's skin.
And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
It means it made them think. It made them feel something.
Yeah.
Whether they loved it or hated it, they couldn't ignore it.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the Afro Samurai user reviews, I think it's pretty clear that this show is not easy to categorize.
It defies categorization.
It's this whirlwind of action and style and cultural influences all blended into this unique and unforgettable experience.
Right, and it demands your attention.
Yeah.
It challenges you to think critically and to engage with its complexities.
Yeah.
And to ultimately decide for yourself whether you're on board for the ride.
So the question is, would Afro Samurai be a show you'd enjoy?
That's the question.
I mean, think about everything we've talked about today.
Yeah.
You've got the stylish violence, the genre-bending narrative, that complex blend of cultures, and, of course, Samuel L. Jackson's iconic voice.
Yeah.
What intrigues you about that?
Yeah.
What might give you pause?
Maybe you're drawn to the visual flair, the willingness to push boundaries.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a little put off by the graphic content, the unconventional storytelling.
Yeah.
Either way, I think Afro Samurai is a show that deserves to be seen, to be discussed, to be debated.
So we want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, let us know.
What is it about Afro Samurai that resonates with you? Head over to our social media and share your reactions.
Yeah, start a conversation.
Maybe even start a conversation with someone who's seen this show.
Right.
And see where that takes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until next time, happy viewing and keep diving deep.